get started. Okay, so I really did appreciate everyone who wrote back and said, the kinds of things you want me to cover in the next couple of weeks, because there's a lot in a drawing class. I'm trying to do in 6 weeks what people might learn over the course of a year or a semester in art school. And I'm trying to do a different segment every week. So someone had requested last week, let's learn about how to draw a human body, which is always a challenge for people. And most of the time, the challenge is that of getting the proportions correct. And they have broken down scientifically over time and research certain formulas as to how to gauge proportion on the human body. And we'll be doing some exercises. But one thing I did want to share about drawing, and I said every week, drawing is mark making. Basically, that's what we're doing, is making marks on a surface. Now, many people who are involved in portraiture, there are many gifted people who can sketch out a likeness just by looking at someone. And you find them as caricaturists at weddings and bar mitzvahs and on the boardwalks, and people who also do profile chalk drawings. You might see them on vacation places. So there are people who really know how to capture a human likeness, but many, if not most, and possibly all, that the portrait artists that I know enhance their experience with either image transfer or image projection or both. And what I mean by that is there are devices out there available to the artist that project the image onto their surface, so they are able to get the proportions right. If you saw the movie or read the book, it's more apparent in the movie, The Girl with the Pearl Earring with Scarlett Johansson. And when Vermeer was working with what they called Camera Obscura, centuries ago, when they were playing around and they discovered mirrors and lenses and how to capture light and refract it and reflect it, they devised this invention, this contraption called the Camera Obscura, that would take an image and through various lenses and mirrors was able to project it. And I think at the time, the rudimentary models projected it upside down onto your surface. And there was a scene in that movie where Vermeer tells Scarlett Johansson to look in this device, and you had to put, like the old-fashioned cameras, you had to cover your head with a hood, and she peeked in this box and she saw the projection on the canvas of the likeness, and it scared her, because centuries ago, these early scientific discoveries were almost considered black magic because people didn't understand them. They thought it, the devil's work or the devil's playground, that people were manipulating images and getting them to project. Mirrors were very big back a few centuries ago with the Dutch painters, the domed mirrors and the concave mirrors that were able to distort and create reflections, and also infinity. When you do the mirror on the mirror thing, it creates infinity. So that was all new stuff. And people very early on attributed a lot of science to witchcraft. I think Galileo was he was accused of heresy. because of the science. It was new and people didn't understand it. It was so beyond our comprehension. And, of course, the church got involved. And if you ever dispute anything they say, then, of course, you're a heretic and you're involved with the devil. So coming forward, rather, I should say, from the Camera Obscura, to this day, we now have what's been called a Lucy. Even when I was working in advertising decades ago, a Lucy is a machine that was like a projector, and it would project on the wall your image, and you could trace around it. It really wasn't so much like tracing, but it would give you the outline. And many portrait artists to this day rely on this to get the likeness right. So it's not cheating. Some people think, oh, well, if you're tracing an image, you're really not drawing it freehand. No, it depends on what your intention is. And I mentioned this on day one. What is your intention in drawing? Is your intention to learn how to draw an exact likeness of someone in a portrait that takes a long time of practice? Or is your intention to get the image down there so you can paint it or you can color it in? Because I consider myself more a painter than a drawer. But I need to know how to draw in order to get my image down in order to paint it. But sometimes I'm impatient. I'm an impatient painter. And I might have a photograph that I've taken on vacation. Let's say I did a street scene in Barcelona, and it had buildings. But instead of measuring every little angle of the roofs, I projected my image, blew it up, defined my big shapes and angles. And then after I got the proportions down based on my projected photograph, I went back in and refined the sketch because my intention was to paint it. And I needed to get a rudimentary drawing down there. And yes, I did use a method to project my image. There's also artists who use graphite paper, where you might take your photograph, put it up there, put a piece of graphite paper, which is like carbon paper, but carbon is all smushy and very black and smudges. Carbon, someone else. Okay, Marguerita's with us, welcome. Carbon paper is very smudgy. Graphite paper creates a softer gray and it doesn't smudge. So you would just trace your photograph with the carbon paper or the graphite paper underneath, and it would be projected on your surface. So don't get caught up in that mentality of, oh, that's cheating because you didn't draw from scratch freehand. Maybe that wasn't the intention of the artist. Maybe the artist just wanted to get it up there so they could paint it or manipulate it or whatever they were going to do with it. So what I want to do today, now that I told you about image transfers and projections, I do want to talk about drawing the human form. And most people, we start with the face, the full frontal face. So what I want you to do on your paper is just draw like an egg shape, an oval, because when you look at people, their face is really not an oval. It's not a horse racing track. It's more like an egg that is wider at the top, the egg that's standing on its narrower side. So I'm going to work really big, like I always show you. And I'm going to draw an egg, and I'm going around it lightly with a pencil first. And then when I like the shape of my egg, I'll darken it up. So the egg is standing on its narrower side. So now that I'm kind of got my overall shape, I've got my egg. And I'm going to go over that in the darker magic marker so you can see it better. And of course, you know, it's not perfect, but nobody's face and head is totally symmetrical. The more you study people, the more that I'm getting a shadow there. Let's see if I can work something on that shadow. The more you'll see that most people's faces are a little asymmetrical. One eye might be a little bit more closed than the other. One side of the mouth might be a little different than the other side. So now what we're going to do, and you can use a ruler if it helps you, you can eyeball it. We want to find the middle of it going up and down. So if my inverted egg here is 13 inches wide, I'm going to make a hash mark at the 6.5 and just draw a vertical line going up and down the center of my egg in the middle, going this way. And then you're going to do the same thing crosswise. I'm going to measure my inverted egg this way. It's about 18 inches. So that would be the 9 point would be my middle. And I'm just going to make a line across the middle. So I have taken my inverted egg and I have bisected it down the middle, going vertically and horizontally. So now I have established the middle. So now what we're going to do is take this middle half and divide that first into a half. So the bottom, from the bottom half, we're now going to divide in half. And my bottom half is 9 inches deep. So at the 4.5 mark, I'm going to make another cross line. Just like that. So these are just guide marks. That's why they're nice and light. And now what I'm also going to do is take that same bottom half section and divide it in thirds this time. So again, if I have, if it's 9, dividing it in thirds is going to be here. Wait a minute, that's wrong. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I've got a line at the 3 mark and a line at the 6 mark. So I've divided it in half and I've also divided it in 3 because those are all going to be touch marks that we're now going to go to. What I'm going to do now is put a split screen up there. And it's got a diagram of how we break down the face into what happens at each third point, where everything goes and how we make arrangements and make the best educated guess as to our proportions. So let me go share my screen with, are you the one I want? I think that's the one. Yes, that's the one I want. So one of the things that they have, and I'm going to send you all of these reference materials and kind of like formula things. So you'll have it, you can print it out or keep it up on your screen while you practice, but you'll have the list of proportions of how we usually lay out a face. So from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, the crown being way up at the top, the top of the egg, and the bottom being the chin. The halfway mark that we made is actually going to be the bridge of the nose where it connects between the eyes. Now, when you look at that, you might say to yourself, it seems kind of far down. But when we get through with this drawing, you'll see that most people, if they start the eyes way up here, you're going to have the eyes up here. So that middle line that we drew is the line that's going to go right through the eyeball. Now, the way to break this area down, like each side of the face, is the width between the eyes, is often, and I say often because every face is different. Certain facial features are unique to certain people in certain races, or people from certain parts of the world might have more pronounced cheekbones or a more broad nose or broad set eyes. So these are just proportions that are general and that are usually taught in figure drawing classes. So the space between the eyes is about the width of an eye. So if we break up this section, each side, into another half, and then bring that in, you'll try and get an idea of how much space to leave. Because if this generally, let's say this is a 2-inch gap I'm going to put between the eyes, that means that the eyes are probably going to be around 2 inches wide. Maybe something like that. So my eyes are as wide as the space between them. And I'm just going to make a couple ellipses, curved lines to suggest my eyes right now. So the middle of, let me do this darker so you can see it, where we measured, oh, boy, she's really bright-eyed. Open those eyes. Where we measured in the middle is the middle of the eyeball. So it's the line that goes right across here. So we're just going to draw the eyes in. Just put a couple ellipses there for now. And then you'll see, if you continue the inner eye, the insides of your eyes, the inner corner of your eyes, and just continue that line down, that usually lines up with the nostrils. Now, remember when I told you you're going to take this bottom half of your egg, and we're going to find that bottom, because I did divide it into thirds too. So my 9 would be my 4.5. Okay, this is my halfway point. The bottom half of our egg, half of that is this line. This line that is the halfway mark is the bottom of the nose. So that's where that little, sometimes it's depicted by a little mark like that. And if the outer edge of the nose lines up with the, bringing the eye straight down from the inside corner, now you're starting to get a suggestion of a nose. And you just might want to round out the nostrils. Let me do that a little darker for you here. So I just made, just little lines like that to suggest where the nose would be. Now we're getting a sense of the the proportion and like where the lines would be drawn. Now, we also divided this lower area into thirds. So that was my 9. So 1/3 up would be at my 6 mark. Now 1/3 up from the bottom would be where your lips come together, would be that little area where the lips meet. So you've got that little, that little bow, that little indentation, and the width of the mouth is usually, and I say usually, as wide as the center of the eye. So now that I made that kind of like center of the eye line going straight down, I get an idea of how wide my mouth should be. And you'll play around with it, the shape of the lips, they have that little indentation in the middle, and bring it out. And there's always that little indentation here where it goes up a little bit. And the area here, when we divide, remember we divided this bottom half, also we did it in half, and then and if we divide that in half, so that was like my 4.5, so that would be the 4.5 would be like the 2 1/8. That's usually like where the bottom of the lip is. So now you're getting a sense of proportion. The mouth will probably be as wide as the middle of the eyeball. And if we made like a circle here from the bottom of the lip to the bottom of the chin, in the middle is where you might find that little cleft, like sometimes there's just like a little mark there to show you how that chin bone might protrude a little bit. So I'm going to just darken this up with magic marker to show you the proportions. So now you're getting like a sense of proportion for your face. Now the eyes, when we come to the eyes, usually the eyelid, we don't see a bottom lid. Usually the top lid has a bit of a hood to it. Like that eye that you see when the CBS logo comes up, but they have a piece on the bottom too. Mostly we don't see that. And when we do draw an eye, we don't draw a whole circle in the middle of our ellipse there, that's our eye. We don't see the top of the eyeball unless our eyes are bugging out and we have a surprised expression. So what I'm going to do is draw it for you to illustrate what I mean. If we took the whole circle in the eye, you can see this guy's bugging out. His eyes are, really seeing the top of the circle, because most of the time we just see the bottom, the circle on the bottom of the eye. And then you've got like that inner ellipse, what is that, our lens or I don't know what that is. I don't know all the names of the eye, the cornea. So the top of the eyeball, we don't normally see. We see the roundness more on the bottom. And we don't fill in the entire eye because we've got whatever that is, the cornea, the iris, you've got stuff like that going on. So the top of the eyeball you don't see because that's under the hood of the lid. Okay, so now we've established some proportions. Now, I have all my formulas here. If you take the whole head, or I should say, if you take the top half now, because we've been working a lot on the bottom half. If you do the top half, which is the middle of the eyeball up to the crown, and you divide that in half. So if I have 9 inches here, 4.5 would be my middle. Because everyone is different, if I divide it in half, it's in the 4.5. I divided it in thirds, it'd be like 3, 6, 9. So here's my third and here's my half. Most people, the hairline is somewhere between the third and the half. If you have like bangs or a low brow, but most of us might be up here to like the third. And we think of a hairline because we usually see hair. If you're bald, then we see the whole, scalp all the way up to the top of the head. Now, the eyebrow is usually on the lower half, like the 3/4 mark. So if this is my half and 4.5, so that would be 1, 2, and an 1/8. This would be my eyebrow line. So basically what you're doing is cutting the egg into halves and into thirds, and what goes on this third, and how do we judge, the half and all that. There's a formula, and as you can see, it's delineated in this chart. Now, the ear usually goes from the top of the eye, or halfway between the eyelid and the eyebrow, and it goes down to the bottom of the nose. That's the average ear, would go to the top of the eyeball to the bottom of the nose. And depending on the ear, some people's ears stick out more than others. So you've got a suggestion of the ear. And the neck. The neck doesn't go right into the shoulders. If you saw shoulder lines coming off here, you would think this person is all hunched up. Normally, we all try and keep our shoulders pressing down and take the pressure off of our trapezius. Most of the time, the neck is as wide as the outside of the eyes. Now, when I look at this individual, I see that his or hers or they, or however this person chooses to be referenced, their eyes seem kind of close together. So if I were trying to capture a portrait of someone, I would be asking questions like, are their eyes more further apart? And sometimes you might see artists using a pencil as a measurer, and you can use it if you're holding up against your model and you say, okay, so the distance between their eyes is this much. And you can say, okay, so then you hold your finger there and then you bring it over to your drawing and you adjust it accordingly. And also the shape of the bridge of the nose. Usually it's more slender at the top and it will flare out more towards the bottom, depending on the person's nose. Everybody's nose is different as well. And then, of course, the hairline. So do they have a lot of hair? Do they have bangs, which would come across the top? But now with this diagram that you've had up on your screen, I'm going to take it down because we are going to move on. Okay, good. I'm checking my time. And we're going to move on from the face and now go to the proportions for the entire body. So let me stop screen share. Okay, so now we're back to our sheet. So basically you got the formula, and I'm going to be sending you all these handouts with the breakdown of how you would grid out a face. And it's fun practice to do. I mean, if you like to just hang out and draw stuff, I will also send you another one that deals more with youthful faces. Most when you're drawing children's faces are usually rounder, where adult faces are more elongated. Kids' heads are, you know, a little bit more Charlie Brownish. They're, you know, like a little fatter. So I will be sending those to you as well. So now what I'd like you to do is take a fresh piece of paper. And if you're using like an 8.5, 11 piece of paper, or a 9 by 12 sketchbook or something like that, you're going to be using your ruler. Let me flip this over. And you're going to be dividing your paper into horizontal sections. You're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You're going to be making 9 lines to create 8 equal sections. So if my area, let's say, okay, I'm using an 18-inch ruler. So if this is my 0 and this is my 18, I can make hatch marks every 2 inches. If you're using a 9 by 12 sketchbook or 8.5, 11, you would mark off probably 8 sections. I was using the entire width of my ruler, and I ran out of space because I think my ruler is 1.5 inches wide, and I could only get so many rows this way. So maybe 1 inch will work for you. But over here, I'll be able to make 9 sections 2 inches. 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I actually have 9. Well, that's okay. So now what I'm going to do is, I think I need a larger triangle. I'll use this triangle. I am going to make horizontal lines. So I will have like parallel bars coming all the way across. My triangle's not big enough. So it can go across your page or just in the middle of your page. So you want to make sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, I have 9 sections, but you only need 8. And I want you to number the sections. Let me try and make this a little darker so you can see my lines better. And this makes it, this is the Ebony by Design, Sanford Design. It makes a nice velvety It's a soft pencil, so it makes a rich, dark line. I don't have to press too hard. It's very smooth and makes a nice hard black line. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so now what I want you to do is number them. So you've got section, we're not numbering the lines, we're numbering the sections. So the section between line number 1 and 2, kind of, this is section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you've got it sectioned off and numbered. I'm going to fill in my numbers with magic marker because we're going to be talking about the sections, not so much the lines, but we will need them. All right, I'm going to now, we're going to go through this formula again, and I am going to put up a graphic that you can keep up there. You can take a screenshot. Again, you're going to be getting all of this in your follow-up email, getting all these handouts. So let me go to this one. Okay, so what we're going to start by doing is making our egg in section 1. And again, you know, just like an oval where the narrower part of the egg is inverted, so the narrower part of the egg is on the bottom. Like that, that's section 1. That's the head. It is a common proportion. And again, you know, I'm saying common because all people are different. That most male figures are 8 heads tall. Most female figures are 7.5 heads tall. So we're doing the male because it's just using the whole section. So not a big deal. So now what we're going to do is dissect the head vertically like we did when we were just doing the face. We're just going to eyeball it and put a vertical line down that face all the way down through all the sections. So you've got like one line, and I'm not going to do that in magic marker because that's a sketch line. That's a guideline. So it's one line through the middle of your egg face, all the way down through all 8 sections to the bottom of the page. So that's our spine. You know, that's your vertebrae. So because the head does not sit up on the shoulders like this, we have a neck. So about 1/3 of the way down section number 2, just make a little horizontal mark because that's how deep the neck is going to come down. So just like a 1/4 to 1/3 of the way down section number 2. Because then we're going to take a horizontal line, as you can see on our little stick figure person on the left side of the shared screen diagram. Remember when I told you if you could draw a stick figure, you can learn to draw? Well, this is Living Proof. You're just going to make a horizontal line to suggest the shoulders. Now, the width of the shoulders on men is usually wider than the width of the shoulders on women. So all of these proportions might vary depending on how that person's built. You might have a woman with very wide shoulders. You might have a man with narrow shoulders, or wider hips. There are some women, mostly women, have wider hips than men. We'll get to the hip section in a second. Where men, usually their hips are less wide than their shoulders. Many women, their shoulders are as wide as their hips, or their hips are as wide as their shoulders. So all these are things that you will adjust based on observation if you were drawing from a live model, so to speak. So usually what we do is say that the shoulders are maybe a half of a head, like whatever when you dissected your egg, whatever that measurement is. So 1 inch is on each side of my vertical line. I've got an inch this way and an inch that way. Then that's what I'm going to add to. I'm going to add that inch to make the width of my shoulders. So the width of the shoulders is often half the width of the head on the average, if you're drawing an average person. So now we've established a neck, we've got a vertebrae. Now, the vertebrae is going to go from the top of the head, as you know, it goes all the way up to our brain, and it travels down our neck, and it goes all the way down to our pelvic region, which would be the line that separates section 4 and section 5. So now you know that the torso, the actual spinal column from the back of our neck to, I guess, the bottom of our coccyx bone will be that length. So that's like the pelvic region. And I'm just doing these little lines here to suggest the ball and socket bones in your hips. As you can see on the drawing, it looks like the person's wearing a little diaper, but what they've done is establish that that's like the mid-range. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right, and then 5. I'm just looking at my notes. So normally, like we said, that the spine ends at the bottom of where section 4 and section 5 meet. Where section 3 and 4 meet is usually where you might find a belt buckle, like your waist. And the navel is not usually at the waist. The navel is usually below the waist a little bit. So when we mark that space between section 3 and 4, that line, that's usually our belt buckle. And then that next line down that separates section 4 and 5 is more like our pubic area. That's where the legs will split, because now we're going to, I'm going to make this a little darker so you can see it. So I made my neck. I've got my shoulders. I'm going to have them slope down a little bit because most shoulders kind of go downhill. They're not straight across unless you were like wearing epaulettes or padded shoulders or some kind of uniform. The width of the hips. For women, sometimes it's as wide as the shoulders. Sometimes for men, it might be a little narrower. So now that we've established that that line between exit 4, section 4 and section 5 is the pubic area, that's where it's like the delta of Venus. That's where your legs meet. maybe slightly below that, because from that line all the way down to the bottom, where at the bottom of section 8 are the legs, and halfway down between the section of the line that separates section 6 and 7, those are the knees. So I'm just going to put little circles there for our kneecaps. So now we've got our what's this muscle? That big bone at the top of the femur, is that connects your hip to your knee. And then that often comes in a little bit. You know, it's not straight out most of the time. It comes in a little bit depending on how wide your hips are, or it can come straight down. But then from there down to the feet, it often comes in a little bit. Now the feet will be resting on the bottom of the line that completes section 8. So see how this is all kind of gridded off, and there is a method to it. Now, establishing where the elbow is, it usually falls between the line that is between section 3 and section 4. That's where the elbow would be. So you can bring your arm down that way, and then the hands come down, and the hands usually dip. The wrist would be at the bottom of section 4, the line that separates section 4 and 5 is the wrist. So I'm going to start going over this in magic marker to show you what I mean. So the elbow will come from where we decided the shoulder is going to be. The elbow will come down and meet at the line between section 3 and 4. The forearm will come down and meet at the line that's between section 4 and 5. And the hands will dangle and usually are 1/3 to 1/2 long as section number 5. And same thing with the hips. Usually the hips and the wrist are on the same line. And then we've got our feet. I'm going to put little toes there. So silly. And you want to get your lines down first before you start making suggestions of thighs and calves and all that. Now, when it comes to the waist, like I said, the belt buckle usually is on the line that separates section 3 and 4. Some people are more high-waisted. Some people are more low-waisted. Some people, their waist is as wide as their shoulders or their hips. You know, they might be more wide body. Other people might come in more with a more defined waist. So you want to just sketch out some proportions before you start finalizing them. When you draw the calf muscle exists towards the knee, and then it tapers towards the ankle. You're not going to find the whole, balloon as an even arc going from the foot up to the ankle. And you'll just come back in and work on putting some meat on those bones, so to speak. Now, this person looks a little high-waisted. Maybe in real life, they might have narrower hips and are more low-waisted. Sometimes women have wider hips that are wider than their shoulders. So all this would depend on the model that you're looking at. Now, another fun thing that you might see are these these wooden drawing models. This can be found in any art store, art supply stores. This is very handy if you want to practice drawing a figure in motion and getting the proportions down. I did not find this in an art supply store. I found this in a living room display in IKEA. So it was like on a shelf with some plants, and they probably thought it was, a cool thing to have as a decor piece. But this little person, what do they call it? It's just, wooden figure. But you can use this also as a guide for your proportions. And it's great because if you say, okay, I want to draw a runner, but I don't know how to get it going. So you just kind of position it like your posable Barbie and get it to move the way you want it to do. And then you can draw it from there. So, okay, so we covered, I'm going to take the screen share off now. We covered doing the face, the visage. We also covered the human form and how scientists and artists and mathematicians have mapped the body to break it down into proportions. I'll also be sending you the proportions for when you do a profile. We just don't have time tonight for to go into the profile, which is trickier because you've got all the things like, the bend of the nose and all that is broken down. And usually the head is as wide in profile from the tip of the nose to the ear. And that's as wide from the ear as it is from the ear to the back of the head. So that's got a whole other set of proportions, but that is fun to do. Another thing I want to cover, I want to do something more funsy next week, because after that, I really want to talk about perspective, which gets back into like a little bit of technical and sciencey stuff again. And I don't want to do that every week because that can be a chore. The drawing, it's like half science and there's a lot of intuitive elements, and I try to incorporate it into a lesson that's something that might stick with you, but I don't want it to be a chore either with a lot of mechanics and calculations. I want it to be fun too. So I encourage you to riff off and create your own bodies if you want to play with it. Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to talk about, and we'll get into it more about when we talk about proportion, but when you're looking at a body, there are things, there's something that we call foreshortening, meaning when I stick my hand out to the side and you see it on a plane and you see my hand up like that, it makes total sense. Your eye knows that this is my arm in profile out to the right. But when I turn it this way, your brain knows that there's an arm back there connecting that hand. But how do you draw that? All of a sudden, this line, when you're drawing me in profile, this is now, I don't know, 10 inches long when you're drawing me. Now we're moving into foreshortening, where my arm has not gotten any shorter. But with foreshortening, now it's only measuring 2 or 3 inches, and now it's at an angle. And what was all on one plane before, now her hand is bigger than her head, which doesn't happen in real life. But because of foreshortening, the things that are in front, way in front, and the things are in back, they're all mixed up now because my head is bigger than my hand. But when my head is in the background and my hand moves forward, all the proportions change. My hand is now huge and my arm is a lot shorter. This is foreshortening. This is how our brain and our eyes try to make sense of what has happened to this three-dimensional item in space. That drawing is trying to capture a three-dimensional item and get it down in 2-dimension, which is challenging. So we will get into more foreshortening and perspective in another lesson. But like I said, I don't want to do something super technical and calculated every week. I want to alter left brain, right brain approaches from week to week. So our time is up for tonight. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask me. Or if you want to share something, now go right ahead. And otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording, end the recording, and you'll be getting the follow-up with the video link and all these worksheets that break down the proportion for you, and we'll review everything that we drew tonight so you can do it again. It's good practice. I hope you have fun with it. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next